Every time the ground trembles in Japan, thousands of people instinctively glance at their phones, check their emergency kits, and, if they're in on the ancient lore, maybe even curse an angry fish. Not just any fish, mind you. We're talking about Namazu, a gargantuan, whiskered, slippery beast said to lie coiled in the mud beneath the Japanese archipelago. His twitch of a tail, a seismic disaster, his sneeze. Say goodbye to your teacups. But how did a bottom-dwelling mud monster end up as the unofficial god of tectonic chaos? Strap in, because the truth is as wild as the quakes he's blamed for. Welcome to Namazu's mud pit, the origins of a shaky legend. Long before Richter invented his scale and seismologists got fancy with fault lines and GPS, the Japanese had a far more visceral explanation for the rumbling earth. Something big, something alive, and definitely something cranky. Enter Namazu, a giant catfish so massive it stretches from one end of Japan to the other. Supposedly imprisoned beneath the ground by the thunder god Kashima, Namazu spends his days sulking in the muck, waiting for the chance to thrash. And when he thrashes, Tokyo shakes, Kyoto crumbles, and somewhere a poor farmer's sake barrel tips over in despair. But here's the twist. Namazu isn't just a monster. In many tellings, he's also a moral force and agent of karmic justice. Those earthquakes, not just geological, they're social corrections, punishing greed and corruption. Which makes him kind of like Batman, if Batman was a catfish who lived in the dirt and caused tsunamis. Still with me? Good, because it only gets weirder from here. Blame it on the fish. How Namazu became Japan's fall guy. Why a catfish? Though, why not a dragon? Or a turtle? Or a drunk samurai with a hammer? The catfish actually has a bit of a PR problem in Japanese folklore. In real life, these creatures tend to stir up mud at the bottom of ponds and rivers, sometimes just before earthquakes. Coincidence? Maybe, but try telling that to a 17th century villager whose entire rice paddy just disappeared into a sinkhole. Over time, the myth evolved. Namazu wasn't just a fish, he was the fish. The cause of the trembling, the shift in the earth's bones, the reason your house now has a skylight you didn't ask for. Kashima, the god charged with keeping Namazu in check, was said to hold the fish down with the sacred rock called the Kanami-ishi. Problem is, Kashima's attention span is not exactly godlike. Every time he leaves his post, presumably for divine karaoke or some sake-fueled god party, Namazu squirms free and raises hell. And yes, there's even a scroll from the Edo period showing Kashima drunkenly stumbling back to pin the fish down again. That's right, your 7.2 magnitude earthquake might have been caused by divine happy hour. The Edo period. Namazu goes viral before Wi-Fi was a thing. Fast forward to the Edo period, specifically 1855, a devastating earthquake, now known as the Ansei Edo quake, hit the capital with brutal force, killing thousands and flattening much of the city. In the aftermath, something bizarre happened. Namazu went viral. Woodblock prints called Namazu-e catfish pictures flooded the streets like memes on Instagram. These prints depicted the catfish being punished by gods, trampled by people, even dressed in formal kimono apologizing for the destruction. Some prints painted Namazu as a villain, a smug fish wreaking havoc and laughing as people scrambled to rebuild. Others portrayed him as a revolutionary hero, punishing the rich and redistributing wealth by, well, smashing all the banks. It was folk religion meets social commentary meets disaster art, a pre-digital tweet storm, but carved into wood and pressed on rice paper. And guess who was profiting from all this catfish chaos? The printmakers, of course. Talk about disaster capitalism. Earthquakes as divine PR stunts. Namazu and the morality of mayhem. Now here's where things get really philosophical. To the average Edo-era peasant, earthquakes weren't just acts of nature. They were punishments, or, depending on your perspective, opportunities. If the ground swallowed your landlord's mansion, maybe that was justice. If the shaking caused the wealthy merchant's storehouse to collapse but spared your shack, divine intervention. Namazu, in this context, wasn't just a chaotic fish, he was an equalizer. In some prints, he's even shown crying while being beaten, suggesting he takes no pleasure in his destructive duty. Others show him lethal, wearing a judge's hat, doling out punishment with gills full of righteousness. It's unsettling, but also weirdly poetic, a giant subterranean fish forced into the role of cosmic karma. The ground shakes, not because of plates and faults and magma, but because society is out of balance. And if you think that's just ancient superstition, well, have you seen Twitter lately? Kashima's terrible job performance review. Let's talk about Kashima, the guy who's supposed to be holding all this madness in check. You'd think a god responsible for earthquake prevention would be a bit more vigilant, but no. The myth goes that he keeps Namazu pinned with his trusty stone, the Kanami-ishi, and yet somehow, every few years, Namazu still manages to wriggle loose and send a few cities toppling like Jenga towers. There's even debate about where the Kanami-ishi actually is. Some say it's in Ibaraki Prefecture, at the Kashima Shrine. Others claim the stone lies deep beneath the earth, impossible to reach or verify, like your cousin's crypto wallet. And really, what kind of security plan involves one god, one rock, and no backup system? Maybe it's time for a new strategy, like seismic duct tape, or a fish-proof net. Or, investing in earthquake-resistant infrastructure. But hey, who are we to question divine workflow? From fish to fault lines, science versus superstition spoiler, both are scary. Of course, we now know the real reasons earthquakes happen. Tectonic plates grinding, slipping, and building up pressure until they snap. Scientists have mapped faults, built warning systems, and created entire careers out of predicting the unpredictable, and yet, Namazu hasn't gone away. He lives on in manga, in children's books, in public awareness posters. During Earthquake Preparedness Month, it's not uncommon to see a cartoon catfish reminding kids to duck and cover. He's even appeared in official safety campaigns, like Japan's version of Smokey Bear, except instead of wildfires, he's warning you about geological annihilation. There's something oddly comforting about that. Even in the face of high-tech models and data analytics, we still leave a tiny, symbolic seat at the table for the myth. Because sometimes, a giant, moody fish is easier to understand than the terrifying randomness of tectonic disaster. And let's be real, it's more fun to blame a whiskered troublemaker than a subduction zone. Is Namazu still mad? Modern quakes and ancient blame. When the Great East Japan earthquake hit in 2011, the devastation was unimaginable. Over 15,000 lives lost. Entire towns swallowed by tsunamis, a nuclear crisis. And amid all the modern explanations, magnitude readings, tsunami models, energy calculations, guess who showed up again? Namazu. He reappeared in art, online comics, even plush toys. In the midst of grief and shock, people turned to the old stories for comfort, for metaphor, for someone, something, to hold accountable. It wasn't about believing in a literal catfish anymore. It was about storytelling, tradition, and the very human need to frame chaos with myth, even if that myth comes with fins. And just like that, the legend lived on, less as fact, more as folklore, a cultural echo that keeps rumbling through Japan's identity. So, should we be feeding this fish or what? Let's say, hypothetically, you could keep Namazu calm. What would he want? A belly rub, an annual sake offering, a commemorative sushi roll. Alas, the myths are silent on the best bribe. Though it would be very on brand for a catfish to reject everything and sulk regardless. You've met real cats, right? But maybe the point isn't to tame Namazu. Maybe it's to remember him. To acknowledge that we still live in a world that shifts beneath our feet, literally and metaphorically. Namazu is a reminder that power lies below the surface. That sometimes, no matter how advanced we become, the earth still gets the last word, or last wag of the tail. Final tremor. What Namazu really teaches us. In the end, Namazu, in just a fishtail, he's the embodiment of unpredictability, of justice, of fear, of laughter in the face of disaster, of how humans, regardless of era, cope with things they cannot control. And in a country like Japan, where earthquakes are a fact of life, it makes sense that people would turn a seismic threat into something they can name, draw, blame, and, occasionally, hug in plushy form. So the next time the ground shakes, maybe don't look up, look down, and picture Namazu, groggy and grumpy, shifting in his sleep. Maybe he's angry, maybe he's itchy, or maybe, just maybe, he's making sure we remember that even the most stable ground can change in an instant. Which is honestly kind of beautiful, in a terrifying, fishy sort of way. So, what do you think? Is Namazu a villain? A hero? Or just a fish who needs better PR? Drop a comment, light an incense stick for Kashima, and don't forget to brace for aftershocks. The tail may flick again soon.